Hello and welcome back to the League Winners Fantasy Show. It's been a long break, but here we are heading into the 2026 season. It is Monday, July 6th, which means training camp is right around the corner, and I, your host, Dalton Salings, have all the information you need to dominate your fantasy football league this season. To kick us off, the first episode of the new year, of the new season, we're going to dive right into the divisional breakdowns. There's obviously a lot of news that has happened since the last time I recorded a video, but we'll get into that on a team-by-team basis as we get to those teams. But to start us off, we are going to go to the AFC North. Now, just as a little refresher, if it's your first time in the channel or you haven't been in a long time, what I do is I project what I believe the stats will look like for any fantasy-relevant players in the NFL season, and then I pass that on to you guys. And so these divisional breakdowns aren't going to have where I have these players ranked at their position or anything like that, but rather what I see their floor and ceiling looking like, what I think they're going to do in the course of the season, and what that looks like for a total number of points in the half PPR format. Now, without further ado, let's dive right in. I'm super excited to be back, and I cannot wait to share everything I've been working on with you guys. So first team we're going to talk about is the Baltimore Ravens. Now, Harbaugh is out the door. He's in New York. New head coach in Jesse Minter coming in, defensive-minded guy, which means the offense may see some changes, but they're not going to be changes made by him. And really, the most important fantasy relevant thing on Baltimore is, of course, the quarterback, Lamar Jackson. Now, I project another big year for Lamar Jackson. I have him just under 3,600 yards and 26 touchdowns. Very strong season with his arm, but obviously the appeal with Jackson is his legs. Derrick Henry is still in the backfield at running back, which does limit Lamar's rushing touchdown upside just because there is that strong running game in Henry. It's not like a Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts where you're going to see goal line touchdowns out of Jackson. It's the longer rushing touchdowns, the one from 10, 20, 30 yards out where he breaks one loose and scores. He will still be doing quite a bit of running. I have him for about 720 yards and 5 rushing touchdowns this year, which would be good for just over 18 and a half fantasy points. He's going to be an incredible fantasy asset for as long as the legs are going, and this isn't the year the legs are going to fall off. We talked about Derrick Henry. He's back another year, and it's hard to bet against him. He's getting older, but we're seeing across all sports Father Time looking a little beatable, and Derrick Henry should continue up his strong workload. I have him for about 280 carries, almost 300 total touches, and so with that, he's going to eclipse 1,400 yards rushing, another strong rushing season for him, and I see him with 15 touchdowns. I think his offense is still very strong. They're going to score a lot of points. It's a good defense as well, don't get me wrong, but the offense is going to score a lot of points. I have 15 rushing touchdowns on the projection for Derrick Henry. I have him around 14 and a half PPR points. So another very strong season from Derrick Henry. It is hard without the receiving upside. That's always the conversation with Derrick Henry is he doesn't have the receiving upside. What does that really make his ceiling? If he scores as many touchdowns as he's proven he's able to score, and he has the reliability that he's had throughout his career in terms of staying healthy and taking on those carries, he's going to have a strong season regardless. And in the half PPR format, it's not as taxing to not catch the ball. Now, speaking of catching the ball, I do believe we could see a real step forward in the Baltimore passing game this year. Jackson has proven an ability to use his arm over the course of his career. I think this year, the clear number one wide receiver is Zay Flowers. Isaiah Likely, one of the tight ends, is out the door, leaving a few vacated targets. I believe Zay Flowers could take some of those. I have him for 120 targets projected, over 1,100 yards receiving. I think Zay Flowers is a bit of a breakout year. Obviously, a guy that everyone knows is very talented, but I believe the production comes up a little bit this year. I have him for 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns, good for just over 11 half PPR fantasy points. I think he's in for a very strong season. He's a very strong player. Mark Andrews is really the other receiving threat in this offense. He's returning for another year. Recently been more in the news for drop problems rather than his receiving talent, which is an unfortunate thing for as talented a receiver as he is. But Mark Andrews, I have still seeing 70 targets, being the second most targeted player on this roster. I do think the Zay Flowers step up hurts him. So even though Isaiah Likely is out the door, I don't think Mark Andrews takes this secondary jump in his later stages of his career because of the talent of Zay Flowers kind of taking over that. But Mark Andrews, just under 500 yards and 6 touchdowns. He's still a red zone threat. He could very easily lead this team in receiving touchdowns, and that's going to be his appeal in the redraft format especially is he's a guy who can get you in every other game touchdown. I wouldn't be shocked if he finished the season with 10 receiving touchdowns, but I don't think he has the same floor as he's had in the past just because he is getting older. We're seeing drops become an issue. That is scary. Those are really the big four you're looking at in Baltimore, but there's a few other names to keep an eye on. In the backfield, it's Justice Hill. He's more of the receiving threat. Not going to do much on the ground, I don't believe, this year, especially if Derrick Henry stays healthy. But I'm projected for about 45 targets, which is good for about 285 yards receiving and a touchdown as well. So late round flyer of a upside should Henry go down, as well as a little standalone value in the receiving game. Not enough to be fantasy relevant, but there's a safe floor there, and the ceiling if Henry gets hurt is very high. And then as for the other receivers in Baltimore, Rashad Bateman is the guy I expect to emerge as the wide receiver too. There's been high expectations for him for years now. I just expect him to kind of take a slight step. Like I said, with Safe Flowers taking the leap, there's not going to be too much other production to go around, but I do like Rashad Bateman quite a bit. Have him for over 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, similar points to Justice Hill. Not a guy you're probably targeting in redraft, but in best ball formats, not a bad pick to look Rashad Bateman's way as the number 2 in that offense. There are 2 rookie wide receivers in Baltimore, and Jacoby Lane and Elijah Sarrett. I don't think either of them have very big production this year. One of them could emerge as the number 3 wide receiver in the offense. I have Jacoby Lane slightly above, but we'll see if that really is a fantasy relevant position. Jackson's not going to throw the ball 500 times, so I don't think he can support that many receiving threats, but a name to keep an eye on late in your draft. The Baltimore team is going to be strong this year. They're my pick to win the division. I do still think they're the best team in the AFC North. They're going to be a good team, and the 4 names to keep an eye on, like I said, Lamar Jackson at quarterback, Derrick Henry at running back, Zay Flowers at receiver, and Mark Andrews at tight end. Nothing crazy there. Moving on to Pittsburgh, where Aaron Rodgers is back for another year, and he's actually added another receiving weapon. I want to start with the wide receivers here. Of course, we still have DK Metcalf back for another year. I'm looking at him to not have an incredible season, but a very strong season. I have him about 96 targets, 830 yards, and 7 scores. So it is going to be interesting to see, with the addition of the guy I'm about to talk about into the offense, if he kind of loses a little bit of production. Last year, he was the clear number 1 and main and best receiver on the roster. But the Steelers brought in Michael Pittman Jr. from the Indianapolis Colts. That's another very viable receiver. Pittman's not a guy who could be a 1 on a championship team, but he's a strong wide receiver too. I have him looking at about 64 targets. The way I looked at this was he gets hurt more by this than DK Metcalf does. In Indianapolis, Michael Pittman was the one. You could say Alec Pierce was coming for that a little bit, but Michael Pittman was the one for years, and him coming to Pittsburgh, where he's the clear number 2 to DK Metcalf, I believe will hurt his production more than it'll hurt DK Metcalf's. I have DK Metcalf around 9 fantasy points per game, and I have Michael Pittman just under 6. So Pittman, I don't think is going to be that good of a pick. Rodgers is getting older. I have Rodgers throwing the ball 525 times, going for almost 3,700 yards. I just don't think he's sustaining multiple fantasy relevant wide receivers. Honestly, not multiple fantasy relevant pass catchers, and that's going to become relevant here in a second. But Rodgers is not a guy you should be drafting in fantasy. Simply put, he's not going to put up the numbers you want. No rushing upside. He's not the same touchdown guy he's been in the past, and that's really the only way that these pass catchers gain more relevance, with the exception of DK Metcalf, is if the touchdown numbers increase. I don't expect to see that this year. I think he throws around 26 touchdowns, which is a fine total, and can be good for a Pittsburgh team that's looking to be competitive this year, but I don't believe he's going to be fantasy relevant in the slightest. When it comes to those pass catchers, I'm really looking at Pat Freiermuth as the other option of what could be the tight end. I just don't believe that it's necessarily going to be there. I had him around 5.5 fantasy points per game, 460 yards and 4 scores. I've been in on Pat Freiermuth for a few years now, and it's just clear to see that he's not going to be a breakout threat. Rodgers doesn't rely on him too much. It does worry me a bit for what his upside and ceiling are. I don't think it's very high. I don't think he has a very safe floor because he's not going to score that many touchdowns. Worries me a bit about Pat Freiermuth. Not a guy I'm really looking at all in the tight end sphere, which is rare. It almost always can talk yourself into the tight end 1 for a team, but on this offense, I just don't really want to have too many pass catching shares, because they are going to lean on the ground game so much. So Jaylen Warren is back for another year. They've also brought in Rico Dowdle, coming off a season at Carolina. So they have really a strong pair of running backs. I have Warren leading this backfield. 210 carries, almost 1,000 yards. I got him around 965 yards, 6 scores on the ground, as well as potentially 42 catches. I think Rodgers is going to hit the running backs more. Always been a guy that's not afraid to hit the check down at running back. We saw that with Kenneth Gainwell last year. Kenneth Gainwell's out the door. He's in Tampa Bay now. It wouldn't be surprising to see Jaylen Warren and Rico Dowdle both become threats in the receiving game. I have them both seeing over 50 targets. So I believe Rodgers will be leaning on that ground game, both handing the ball off out of play action and hitting them with the checkdowns, as well as design screen passes. Rico Dowdle I have for 640 yards on the ground and 5 scores, as well as 44 catches. I think both of these guys can be very fantasy relevant. I am higher on Warren than I am Dowdle. I think Dowdle gets a little more work in the receiving game, but I do think it is a pretty even split in terms of third down work. So I would not be surprised to see both have some relevance in that regard in the passing game. Like I said, I've got Warren about 3 points ahead of Rico Dowdle when it comes to points per game, but I believe both are valuable assets, and if either are sliding in your drafts, I think those are definitely guys you want to take advantage of, and would honestly be my favorite 2 Steelers to roster right now. The scary part is you don't know which one of them is going to be the hot hand on a given week. If Rico Dowdle's running well, is Jalen Warren going to lose touches and vice versa? I believe it may be a hot hand approach with Mike Tomlin out the door for the first time in forever, it feels like. But I'd say for right now, you want to trust both running backs and obviously not drafting both of them, but finding a way to get one of them onto a roster would be a strong thing to do. Is the running backs and DK Metcalf are really the only 3 Steelers I'm looking at this season. Now moving on to the Cleveland Browns, you guys start with the quarterback situation. Reports out of camp are that it is a competition with Deshaun Watson currently in the lead, and for that reason I'm projecting Deshaun Watson as the starting quarterback. I would not draft a quarterback out of this room. I think it's with him and Shedeur Sanders being the 2 competitors. I don't think either of them is starting for the entire season. It doesn't make a lot of sense for me to grab either of them. If I was taking one, it would be Watson because I think he is the starter. I also think Watson can do enough to support a better fantasy lineup than Shedeur Sanders can. So that's why I'm also not mad at projecting Watson right now. I believe he will be the one, and he will do more for the fantasy assets than Sanders will. The number 1 option on this team last year was Harold Fannin Jr., who is back another year. No more David Njoku. David Njoku now with the Chargers, so that opens up space, even more space for Fannin at tight end. He had a phenomenal end of the year last year, was setting tight end records in Cleveland, which was phenomenal to see. I have him leading this team in targets handedly with 115, going for almost 800 yards and 6 scores. Touchdowns are going to be a little tough to come by in this Cleveland offense. I do have Fannin leading the way with 6 scores through the air, but it's going to be tough to score, and I think that does limit Fannin's ceiling. But a very safe floor, in my opinion, is he will eat up targets and has proven he's a strong catcher of the football. I have him for about 9 fantasy points a game, which is great out of the tight end position. Not a top 3 guy, but very strong production. It will be interesting to see how high he climbs in drafts come redraft season as those drafts start pouring in. How high is he going to go? Are people going to be excited about the production from last year and rise, or be scared of the quarterback situation and let him fall? If he's sliding, this is a guy you want to take advantage with because he is going to have a very safe floor, even if his ceiling isn't as high as some of these other top guys. I want to look at the running game as well, with Quinshon Judkins coming back for a full season. Last year, the rookie out of Ohio State struggled with some injuries, but had a good season while he was healthy. I'm projecting a very strong season for him. He is clearly the one. Jerome Ford is gone, which makes him clearly the one. Dylan Sampson being the 2 in this situation. So I like Quinshon Judkins a lot. I have him over 1,000 yards rushing and 9 touchdowns this year. Not too much of a receiving threat, but I still have him getting about 27 catches. I'm looking at him to be around 11.5 fantasy points per game, right around where I have Jalen Warren, actually. Judkins will be going well before Warren, but it's because of the ceiling. Quinshon Judkins' ceiling is through the roof. He got injured last year. His offensive line is questionable, but on a team that's going to be most expect to be struggling, it's interesting to see if they'll lean on the ground game as much as I believe they will. If they do lean on the ground game, Judkins is going to have a huge season. If they're playing from behind as much as people is projecting, that's where the risk comes in. But the high ceiling of Judkins is leading to him getting drafted earlier, and I don't mind that in the slightest. I love his game. I think he's a great player and could take a step forward this year. Dylan Sampson is also a player I'm liking a little bit just because of the injury risk of Quinshon Judkins. A little handcuff with Dylan Sampson, who was also a rookie last year out of Tennessee. A guy I like a lot. I believe will be a threat in the passing game, taking some of the checkdowns in that offense. So have him for 41 catches and just about 5 fantasy points per game. A strong season from Dylan Sampson. Once again, standalone, not value, similar to Justice Hill though. Steps up big in injury prevention. And Quinshon Judkins is much more injury prone than Derrick Henry was. Dylan Sampson is a name I would keep an eye on. Last pick in your draft. Maybe stash him on your bench and see what happens, or even picking up off waivers as the year goes along. He's a guy that could have a huge season should Judkins go down. Looking at the wide receivers, Jerry Jeudy is an ugly name in terms of not really a guy you want to have on your roster just on name value alone, but he is the one in this Cleveland offense. And if you believe in Watson or Sanders, it would be smart to get the wide receiver 1 from that team. I have him leading the team in targets, the wide receiver room, Fannin leading the team in targets, but Judy leading the wide receiver room in targets, but still going for about 5.5 fantasy points per game. I mean, there's just not a lot of touchdowns, not a lot of targets to go around, and there are two rookies that have been drafted this year. We have Denzel Boston and Casey Concepcion, who are both coming in. Isaiah Bond is back for another year. Cedric Tillman is back for another year. There are a lot of bodies in the Cleveland wide receiver room. That's what worries me. I don't want to have any of these guys in redraft. I have no idea who the guy's going to be. If I don't know who the guy's going to be and I don't have to spend draft capital on these guys, especially the rookies who are going to be, oh, the camp reports are coming out, they look awesome, they look great, they look fast. Yeah, I don't want to touch it. I have no idea who the guy's going to be. I will eat the I was wrong and should have drafted one of them rather than I'm sitting one of them on my bench and wasting a bench slot on a guy who is going to have 3 touchdowns on the season and I have to guess which week that's going to be. Not going to the wide receiver room in Cleveland. Really the only 2 guys in Cleveland I'm looking to draft. Harold Fannin and Quinshon Judkins with potentially a Dylan Sampson late sprinkled in. Other than that, I'm avoiding the Cleveland offense entirely. Scares the crap out of me because I don't trust any of these guys, and I think Cleveland struggles quite a bit this year. They traded away Myles Garrett. The pass rush isn't the same. The defense isn't the same. This is not a good team this year. I don't want a lot to do with it, in all honesty. Now, kind of the opposite of the Cleveland Browns offense would be the Cincinnati Bengals offense. You want to talk about a high-octane offense that you want to just get some sort of share in, it's the Cincinnati Bengals. You got to start with Joe Burrow. I have him going for almost 4,500 yards passing. I'm throwing the ball over 600 times, 37, almost 38 passing touchdowns. I think he's in for a great season if he can stay healthy. What's always the thing with Burrow is can he stay on his feet? Can he stay healthy? If he stays healthy, I think he's going to have a phenomenal season. He's a quarterback you want. He has the weapons around him. He's shown he can do it. This is one of the safer, if healthy, quarterback picks. The health is such a big red flag, though. I cannot blame anyone for hesitating about drafting him. He's the type of quarterback that if you draft him, you want to draft a second quarterback just in case he goes down. There's debates about, do I draft a second quarterback? Do I not? Burrow, you have to draft a second quarterback because of the injury risk. But man, he could have such a strong season. Doesn't provide the same rushing upside as a lot of the other top quarterbacks do. But he throws the leather off of the football. And I have him projected for a huge season this year. His top 2 weapons, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, love both of these guys. Chase is the wide receiver 1. I'll spoil that right now. Best receiver in football. I have him for 1,500 yards and 11 touchdowns. A phenomenal player, has a great quarterback in the football, and even if Burrow goes down, he's proven he can still get the ball from whoever's throwing it. He's the best receiver on this team, the best receiver in football. Don't overthink that one. If you're taking a receiver in the first round and you have your pick of the litter, Jamar Chase is the answer. I have around 16.5 fantasy points per game, a remarkably high number. I'm loving Jamar Chase this year. I also love T. Higgins this year, the wide receiver 2, my highest ranked wide receiver 2 by far. I have him for 10 touchdowns and over 1,000 yards. I think there are going to be 2 receivers in Cincinnati this year who go over 1,000 yards and over 10 touchdowns. Higgins is, I believe, a safe pick because he's proven he can do it as the 2, and should Chase miss time, he steps up as the 1 and has even more upside. I love T. Higgins this year. I'm all in on him. I have him just over 12 fantasy points per game, not on a Chase level, but still a great level. Loving T. Higgins this year. Andre Isovas, goodness gracious, what a fun name to pronounce, is also there. He's really more of just injury. Should somebody go down, he steps into a role. Burrow can support 3 pass catchers. I just don't think he will. I think there is so much talent in those top 2. That's where the ball goes the majority of the time. I have them combining for over 300 targets between the 2 of them, Higgins and Chase, that is. I expect them to be big producers. At tight end, you got Mike Gesicki back for another year. I have him even lower than Pat Freiermuth. A good player-ish, a good offense, but like I said, not enough targets to go around. I have him getting 60 targets, scoring 3 touchdowns, but with 2 receivers who can score in the red zone, it's not like you have to look to the tight end to score there. The touchdown upside isn't super high. Like, there's not a huge path to a ton of targets. I just am not that in on Mike Gesicki. I don't mind it late, and I've honestly seen myself drafting more Mike Gesicki than Pat Freiermuth just because of the ceiling of Joe Burrow, but not really looking to either of those guys. At running back, you got Chase Brown. He had a huge year last year. I expect another, really more of the same. And for about 225 carries as well as 90 targets, he's the 3rd receiver in this offense, in my opinion. I am for 460 yards receiving, 4 touchdowns on 72 catches. That would be great in a half PPR format. as well as almost 1,000 yards on the ground, have him around 970 yards on the ground and 6 scores. I don't think this team's going to score on the ground much. I'm obviously projecting big touchdown seasons for the wide receivers. I expect that to be the mainstay of this offense, just throwing the football. Chase Brown can still have a huge year through the air, as well as taking a lion's share of the target carries on the ground, I'm just under 14 fantasy points per game. Burrow, I do have over almost at 18.5, so I have him very close to Lamar, just under Lamar Jackson's total, which is interesting with the lack of rushing. But a good season from the Bengals, a better season, I believe a playoff team for sure, but a strong offense you want to get shares in. Chase, Higgins, Brown, Burrow, kind of similar to Baltimore. There's 4 guys that you are looking at to put on your roster. I would rather have those 4 than the Baltimore 4, but that's neither here nor there. I just want to say this is a huge step up, went a little bit faster than last year. If you're here last year, these were some long videos, but got through the AFC North. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and I'm excited to say we'll be posting 3 times a week for the month of July, getting you all the information you need, as well as a special surprise that should be revealed on the next episode that I am super excited about. Thank you so much for tuning into this one, and can't wait to see you next time.